So if you want to open things up more on a blues in E, using chord substitution is a really good way to do that. And in particular, Freddie Green style chord substitutions are really useful. Freddie Green was the rhythm guitar player in Count Basie's band for like 50 years. And obviously, like lots of other people use these chord voicings, but he's just considered the epitome of that style. And if you don't know what I mean by that, it's this sort of a dance band style of having chords that move. You know, you've got a chord every 2 beats, or sometimes every bar, every beat. But we're going to use them in the key of E and use some open strings. But there's 2 parts to using these chord substitutions. One is just physically knowing what they are, what the shapes are, and how to grab them. Then the other part, of course, is how to use them. Where did you use them? So you hear the term chord substitution, it's like, well, what do I substitute for what? And it's really just a set of variations on the chord progression. It's built on the skeleton of the 12-bar blues, but it's just using passing chords and extra chords that still take you back to, it's still built around the bones of the 3 main chords of the blues, but you're using extra chords to connect up those main chords. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to stick to just the first 4 bars of a 12-bar blues right now, just so you can see in kind of a microcosm how this gets put together. So if we've got a blues in E, then the first bar is E, and the second bar is A, and then the next 2 bars are E, and then you're going to resolve in the 5th bar back to A. So that's the territory that we have to cover. So all of these chord voicings are based around the idea of playing just the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string. They're like a shorthand for bigger chords. So in this case, the E7 we've got, if you can picture a big open E7 chord, we're just going to pick out the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string of that chord voicing. So we don't need to hold down anything else except the notes we're playing. So thumb, index, and middle play the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string, and there's E7. Now for A7, you could finger it like this with this 5th fret, 5th fret, and 6th fret, but you could also use the open A string. So that's one exception to this rule of using the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string, because we're playing fingerstyle and we want some open strings, because we're not playing with other people and wanting to keep everything sort of dry and controlled. You want to have notes that ring out and sustain so that everything feels like it's continuing to flow. So there's A7, there's E7. Now to get from E7 up to A7 in the first bar, we're going to climb up to this chord, which is an E over G sharp, which means there's an E chord, and here's the root and 5th of E on the 2nd fret of the 4th string and the 4th fret of the 3rd string. And then here's the 3rd of the chord, G sharp, it's in the bass. So since the bottom note is the 3rd, or a G sharp, it's called an E over G sharp, because the E is over. If you stacked up the notes and looked at them, the E part would be over the root. The E would be above, literally, the G sharp. That's too much of an explanation. Just here's the voicing, E over G sharp. So E over G sharp, then we get to A, and now to connect A up to E, we're going to use a diminished chord, and this is a A sharp diminished, or it could be a B flat diminished, I guess, but we're going to think of it as A sharp because we're looking at the bass line going like this. We're going to land on an E7. That's kind of our destination, so we want to connect this up to this. So we're going to go from A7 to A sharp diminished to E, and you can hear how it flows, and if you look at what the bass is doing so far, it's doing this, which you can imagine like the bass player doing in a swing band, right? Or like a Warner Brothers cartoon from the 40s. So this diminished chord is 6th fret, 5th fret, and 6th fret, and then it goes up to this E7. And the confusing thing potentially about these voicings is it's the exact same shape for both chords, the A sharp diminished and the E7 with a B in the bass look exactly the same. And I'm not going to get into the theoretical nuances of why, but just a heads up that when you're watching someone do this, or you're learning these chord voicings, sometimes the same shape has more than one function. So this is something to be aware of. So this E7, here we've got the fifth in the bass, we've got B, and then we've got the third of the chord, this is G sharp, and then the seventh over here, the D. So there's E7. So we're getting this climb, and then now we're going to do a chord that you may not think of including in an E blues, which is a B minor 7. We're going to go to B minor 7 and then back to E7. So the B minor 7 looks like this, and if you think of like just a B minor 7 like you'd play on a Santana song or something, we're just going to grab these three notes, 7th fret, 7th fret, and 7th fret. And from here, you can also think of this as just like a E, like a suspension of the E chord. Like here's the third of E and it goes up a half step and it comes back. And next, we're going to do a chromatic half step into the A7. We want to get to here. That's our destination. And so we're going to go half step from B flat 7 down to A7. And so here's the same thing we've been using really for E and A with open strings, but now we have to use all fretted strings. So here's 6th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret for B7. And then we land by half step on the A, and we've made it through the first 4 bars and landed on the A chord. And the reason this works, you can just hear, like as a guitar player, like, oh yeah, you can half step into a chord. That always sounds good. And the theory reason is, if you've heard of something called the tritone substitution, it basically means that this chord is, the root is a tritone away, that the interval of a tritone away from this chord. E7 is the 5 of A7. It's a 5th away. So as such, the E7 resolves to A7. B flat 7 has 2 of the same notes that E7 does. It's got this note and this note. And so you can substitute B flat for E to get to A7. If that makes sense, great. If it doesn't matter. You can just use the sound and get it into your head. So we've got this. Right? And this whole thing here, we're really just killing time on E. The idea is just not to sit here on E, but to go somewhere very closely related and then come back. So those are the voicings themselves and where they go. And then if you're going to play with them in a fingerstyle context, you'd obviously want to loosen things up a little bit, break up the chords and maybe arpeggiate them a little bit. Use the high string here in E as a common tone or a pedal tone the whole time. And so it just gives you more places to go. So if you were playing, so you could be playing some pretty down-home stuff and then kind of slide into this more colorful place chord-wise and go back and forth. So once you have those voicings kind of in your repertoire, you can make use of them in a lot of different ways. So there's the Freddie Green chord voicings, chord substitutions. If you've got any questions, you've got any comments, scroll down, leave me a comment, drop me a line, let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time.